Got it.
Hey Vimoh, welcome to the All Walks of Life podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
So, the viewers and the listeners, everybody, Vimoh is a content creator commenting on atheism, Indian politics, culture, media, and creativity. And yeah, he's a fascinating guest. I am a regular listener and I tune into his sort of live streams, and I've learned a lot from him. And I really like the way he sort of approaches topics. So it's just a really nice opportunity for him to come on my podcast and yeah, just I don't know, just brainstorm a few ideas that I think about, and I think Vimoh sort of thinks about as well. So yeah, welcome on Vimoh. And was that an accurate introduction? Do you think, or do you think I missed out on something? Because there's so many topics that you do cover, so it's sort of a little difficult to hone it down into
That's
a.
all right. That's all right. You're mostly talking about how I approach things in an interesting way. I don't know what that means, but
Okay.
you are entitled to your opinion.
Don't you think everyone approaches? Don't you think everyone approaches everything in an interesting way?
Yeah.
Because do you know what I mean? Because like
Yeah.
we're all sort of confined by our biases, and we look at the world in a certain manner.
Yeah.
And for you, it might be based on certain agendas. For me, however much we may not want to sort of put
Yeah.
that out, if
Absolutely.
that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. I absolutely have an agenda. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, if
Yeah.
if you don't have an agenda on your channel, like who like I recently saw this tweet.
Exactly.
Did you come across that tweet by Kunal Kamra?
Which one?
So he recently, I think he had Acharya Prashant on his YouTube channel. He's a
Hmm.
big advocate of like Advaita Vedanta and
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
those kind of things. So there was this really funny comment that he got on his YouTube channel. Ki, why is he showing such random clips of other spiritual people? What sort of agenda is he trying to promote? Like, can't you just be to the point? And then Kunal Kamra's like, bro, this is my channel. I can promote my agenda, right? Like that's kind of the
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. I get
Yeah.
those comments so many times. Like, you should title the video this. You should call the video this. You should not do this in the thumbnail. And I'm like, how about I do whatever I want because this is my channel.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, you cannot watch it.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting stuff. So, Vimo, like you're a big advocate on like, and you talk a lot about atheism and how
Hmm.
you'd want to see that. I don't know, maybe I'm misterming it and maybe I'm sort of putting words in your mouth, but you'd want to see more of, let's say, more of a resurgence of atheism in perhaps Indian thought and perhaps Indian sort of contemplating with ideas of atheism. Would that be a right way of putting it, or do you
Uh,
just feel passionate about it that
it,
you put things out?
I don't feel particularly passionate about it. This is out of need, not out of, wanting to evangelize atheism. Because the primary purpose of what I do is to resist the irrationality that is seeping into our discourse on every level, be it social, be it cultural, be it political, be it just family conversations. And a few years ago, at least, there was some kind of shame associated with, you know, uh, someone will say, I believe in this stupid shit, but they'll say, I don't really believe it. It's just something that people say. Now they'll like stake their reputations on it. So it's not just atheism. I think the channel is primarily about skepticism, which is like, I would like people to examine their own beliefs. I have examined my own beliefs in order to get where I am. I find that not a lot of people are examining their own beliefs, and I would like to help more people do that. So if you notice, it's a call in show, people call in. The unspoken question in the air is always, what do you believe and why? So people try to present their cases, I try to break it up. Sometimes I even agree with them, sometimes I go halfway, they come halfway. The goal is to have conversations about these things because I think it's important. Clear thinking leads to clear decisions, and we are not going to be able to make good decisions on any level if we are not clear about our thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I think you've spoken about this on your channel, and I think you reference it quite a many times on your live streams as well. That how you sort of had this transition, as you were saying as well, because of how you had this transition from being perhaps more on the reactionary right in terms of
Hmm.
an Indian or a Hindu particular context, and
Hmm.
how you sort of transition more towards, let's say, a left leaning that kind of thought. But can you? Maybe you did sort of explain that in that particular video. I don't remember now. I did watch it a while back. Did you sort of talk about, let's say, how that sort of shift even led to your religious outlook being different? So perhaps coming out of however you would have wanted to term it, be it religious, be it spiritual, however much, and now to perhaps a more atheistic school of thought. Like
I
what was
think,
that journey like? I know you've talked about it many times, and I'm bugging you
yeah,
with the
so
question
I think
again.
what you're talking about is my shift from the political right to the political left, and my shift from religious belief to atheism.
Primarily,
I
yes.
think my shift from religious belief to atheism helped my move out of the religious right. So that is how I would put it. Primarily, what happened is that The reason we all believe in religion or subscribe to religious ideas, even in the political sphere, is because we are showered with it every day from morning till night. Now, once I decided to, once I said, okay, yeah, religion no longer makes sense to me, I will call myself an atheist. I don't believe in God or anything supernatural. It's just nonsense. I will call myself an atheist or a skeptic. Uh, the amount of religious propaganda that I was being drowned in reduced a lot. And you'll find that the only way religion persists is through this propaganda. There is no other way it can persist. The way our airwaves are filled with, Baba Log ka talk, the way our uh, common discourse is full of religious ideas, the way our politicians use religion in order to garner votes, etc. This is all part of a Sochi Samchi strategy. If they don't do this 24/7, religion will just disappear. Nobody talks about science every day. Nobody talks about science from morning till night, right? Except scientists and science communicators. But we all recognize science, and science continues to thrive. We're using science right now to talk to each other. Everything in your room is a result of science. Everything in my room is a result of science. Everything we have came from science, right? We don't have to talk about it. It is self-evident. But religion needs constant propaganda in order to live. So a huge part of the conversion that you're talking about happened, the deconversion, in fact, that you're talking about happened because I simply stopped needing it, and it fell away like a dress without uh, strong enough threads. It just fell away. So largely that is what the reason was. I have talked about this in greater detail on my channel on a long video.
Mm-hmm.
It's episode 55 on my live stream. Anyone who's interested can go watch it. There is another video on my main channel called How I Became an Atheist, which is about the religious atheistic aspect of it.
Yeah.
And the episode 55 on my live stream, I should probably put them all in one playlist because people
Yeah.
keep asking about it.
Does
And I
YouTube
really
have an
don't have
option?
anything new to say about it. Yeah.
Does YouTube have an option to pin? Like nowadays, Instagram has allowed you to pin certain posts, right?
YouTube
Maybe you
has
could.
a playlist option, right? So I can
Uh,
just put those two in a playlist and put them on both channels and
Maybe you
just
should
say,
just
go watch this
maybe
playlist.
because you get asked about this so many times. Maybe you should just pin it on like your what's it called, the homepage. So when people enter, like people have
Yeah.
like channel intro. You should have like Vimoh intro is like,
Yeah, but the thing is that I don't want them to,
of
I
course,
don't
huh?
want that to be the selling point of the channel. I
Yeah,
want
I'm just
the
joking.
conversations we have as the selling point.
Yeah. No, but this is quite interesting. But can you, obviously, you did mention that there is sort of a longer sort of video you have sort of put together where you sort of go into much more detail and you answer questions as well from the listeners. Um, could you sort of mention some of the threads, perhaps some of the things you started noticing that were like, okay, this is not correct. And this
Hmm.
probably means that there is some sort
You're
of,
talking about religion or politics?
let's talk about religion, yeah, because we're talking
Okay.
about atheism primarily. So
Hmm.
so you would have thought that acha, if you are in, let's say, a religious camp, there would be certain things you'd be noticing or certain conversations you'd be having or certain things you'd be coming across which would sort of put like dents in your religious camp. Ki, acha, this doesn't make sense then, and then you'd start I don't know, rethinking your position. Like what were
Yeah.
some of those, like what were some of those that
So
come to mind?
So by the time I started engaging seriously with atheism, I was like, my engagement with religion was on a very, there are people who call themselves spiritual but not religious.
Mm-hmm.
My engagement was on that level. The rest had fallen away naturally, and there were a few threads that were continuing to attach me to my beliefs, and uh, one of them was this. One of them was that it seemed to me that human beings have a natural tendency to believe in religion. Religions seem to form spontaneously. Like, you put a bunch of people in a place, they will find certain common threads, they will create some gods, they will
Mm-hmm.
have some rituals, and boom, you have a religion. It seems almost natural. So my contention at that point was that, okay, so this is something that happens. Clearly there must be a reason for it, and there are people even now for whom the last connecting thread to religion is this. They think it's natural. What I realized and what caused me to break away was that, there are a bunch of books, etc., there are a bunch of talks, etc. I watched the usual suspects. I watched Hitchens, Dawkins, and Sam Harris, and I got to a point where I was watching American atheism call-in shows where Matt Dillahunty was talking to people
Yeah.
about their beliefs, and I was having a lot of fun. Yeah, they're making sense. They're making fun of Christians and Muslims, and I told you I was on the reactionary right. Uh, but then one day it's occurred to me, what they are saying, can it be applied to my own religion? And I did that. I applied it to my own religion, and I realized it's all ek hi thali ke chatte batte, right? They're like, we say that our religion is different fundamentally from Abrahamic. No, it is not. And on the most basic level, on the most everyday level, on the level that most people engage with ideas like religion, God, belief, ritual, it's the exact same thing. There is nothing special about our religions. So uh, after that happened, the process kind of accelerated. And then I read Yuval Harari's book, Sapiens. And even though there are a bunch of problems with Sapiens, I found one thing to be quite useful, which is that it talked about something called the cognitive revolution, which has to do with human beings inventing language, human beings using stories to come together. And if you remember what I said about, like, my question in my mind was, why do religions spontaneously emerge? What is the
Hmm.
evolutionary utility of them? And that answered that perfectly for me.
Right.
Like, the reason we tell stories, the reason we create myths, mythology, gods, is because it's a great way to talk to each other. It's a great way to define who's in our group and who's in that group, and that creates tribal cohesion.
Yeah.
So that answered my questions to a great degree, and that was the final thing. I said, okay, that was the one thing I had a doubt about. Now there's nothing connecting me to it, so I can just let it fall off. That's what
But
happened.
so this is another sort of question that I did sort of write down that I wanted
Hmm.
to ask you. So my particular contention with this is, so I don't know if you how much you're sort of well versed with Nietzsche. So he has this very famous quote, and I think most atheists and most people sort of who've dabbled into philosophy a little bit would sort of know about this. So he talked about how God is dead. So that's like the most famous thing, and most people sort of know about it. That's what he sort of said. But few people realize like the sort of latter portions of the quote, and he sort of goes on to that we have killed him, and now we all the waters in the world will not be enough to sort of wash
Hmm.
our hands clean of the
Hmm.
sort of sin that we've done. Primarily, so what he was sort of hinting at was that if you look at our evolutionary track as well, whatever it may be, as you were saying, we've been finding these symbols, we've been finding these objects, we've been finding these whatever it is, myths, stories, to sort of give some sort of security or some sort of meaning for us to sort of fill that void that everyone has, right? So but he's sort of talking about, sure, we might be thinking of ourselves that we're sort of going in the right direction, but maybe it might not be the case, because if it was fire, which was like which was like a great invention at the time, or the bow and arrow, or as you said, these archetypal sort of cave drawings or these stories that we tell ourselves,
Hmm.
those were giving our life some meaning and were telling us that, acha, this is like some purpose. Whereas now
Yeah.
it sort of left a really big void, and that's really difficult for people to sort of fill. Now, I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. What I'm trying to say is that people who still subscribe to religion in some sense, I wouldn't say that they're sort of misguided or something. I can sort of understand the sentiment that they're coming from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But my greatest realization was that this need for something like an archetypal framework on which to base your life is a need that can be fulfilled by things other than religion.
Mm-hmm.
There are people whose entire life is football. Their gods are the football players that they look up to. Their rituals are playing football at a certain time of day. Uh, Human beings are. My problem with religion is that it oversimplifies what a human being is, and it tries to create one definition of what a human being is. There are people for whom comic books are religion. There are people for whom, comic cons may be pilgrimages. There are people for whom this need for an archetypal framework might be fulfilled by just cooking, right? So we are tribal animals. We create tribes. Our tribes can be based on many, many, many things. Religion is just one option. Religion happened to be one of the first things we did,
Mm-hmm.
because and it was fed by our lack of understanding of nature. Now it is entirely possible for there to be a completely scientifically consistent religion, right? A religion which is based on what we know about the universe. There is a very nice book that I read some time ago, a long time ago, in fact. It was called The Universe as a Green Dragon, right? And I was fascinated. How can the universe be a green dragon? And the first chapter explains Do you know what the universe is? I don't. So I might as well call it a green dragon. You
Fair
call it a
enough. Yeah.
potato, right? We don't have anything to compare the universe to. So that is what they base their statement on.
Mhm.
And I think that we can base our the things on the basis of we assemble and call each other ye mera apna hai, ye koi aur hai. These things can be anything. And we have seen in recent times people are assembling because of fandoms, right? If you just type red wedding reaction, you'll find people laughing, sorry, crying really genuine tears, like shock and pain at the death of people who are actors who are being paid to die, paid to pretend to die horrific deaths. We know this. We know they're actors who are being paid, but we can base our emotional lives on something entirely fictional. It's just that these people are honest
Mhm.
about it. They know it is fiction,
And it's a compelling story.
religion. Yeah, it's a compelling story. You can get a religious feeling from any fiction, any piece of fiction. There are 18 book series of science fiction novels with fans having tattooed character names on their bodies or dialogues on their bodies. Star Wars, Star Trek, these are all fandoms that function perfectly okay as religions. There are people who perform wedding rites based on the kinds of weddings that happen in these fantasy universes. Religions are just old stories.
Yeah.
And my problem with religions is that they're dishonest stories because they pretend to not be stories,
Mhm.
right? If you can have that archetypal framework to govern your life, and it is based on a work of recognized fiction, by all means go ahead and do it. I do it. I'm pretty sure you also have favorite fiction.
For sure. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
What are we not if it's not like the great works of fiction we've read or the great films we watch in some sense, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
all that, it's also a combination of that in
yeah.
some sense. Something else that I've sort of seen, you talk about quite a bit now, and this is something I've seen in other sort of channels as well, who propagate themselves to be of like this, let's say the Hindu, right? But still perhaps have a rationalist bent of mind, but still wanting to remain in the Hindu fold. So they've started calling themselves Hindu atheists. And
Hmm.
you sort of talked about how there's nothing such as a Hindu atheist. Can you entangle basically what your thought behind that is, and where you're sort of coming from?
Yeah, my point is not that people should not call themselves a Hindu atheist. My point is more that it's a useless, meaningless label. It does not mean anything. It's like calling yourself a cooking cyclist. Sure, you cook and you cycle. There is no reason to put those things together.
Right.
And in the case of Hindu atheist, it's even more egregious because Hindu is a religious identity, and
Huh.
atheism, at least on one level, is a rejection of religion and a refusal to call yourself by any marker that indicates that you believe in a god
Right.
or gods, right? My point is that most of what we call Hindu today was not called Hindu when it was originally composed. There is no mention of the word Hindu in the Bhagavad Gita.
Mhm.
There is no word of the mention of the word Hindu in the Vedas or the Upanishads. It's a latter invention. It's a label created to put all these things under one bracket now. Now, when people call
I mean,
themselves Hindu,
when the Mughals did it, not now. I mean, there's still like some time back. When the
yeah,
Mughal
sometime back,
was it
yeah,
the
yeah,
Mughals or the Persians? I
latter
know.
times
Yeah,
basically,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Mughals or the Persians or the British, whatever you want to call it. The
yeah.
British
ठीक है.
actually put it on paper. So my point is that when people want to claim a lot of things that happened in ancient India, they just call it Hindu atheism. For example, the Charvak school of thought is not Hindu atheism because you can't call it Hindu because the word Hindu was not there. B, you can probably put a label around all the ideas back then and call it Vedic, but you can't do that either because the Charvaks explicitly rejected the Vedas. So you can't call them Vedic atheists. What do you call them? You call them Indian materialists, right? Because they were materialists who lived in the landmass that is now called India.
Mhm.
And I'm especially paying attention to the fact that India is also a word that did not exist then. But right now, it is used to indicate this landmass. Correct?
Yeah.
Now, right now, what is the definition of the word Hindu? It is not something all encompassing, it is a word used to denote one religion.
Yeah.
You take up any Sarkari form, it says Hindu is a
Mhm.
religion. You go out
Mhm.
and ask people, hey, what is Hindu? Nobody is going to give you high-fangled answers. Yeah, but Hindu is supposed to be. Everyone is going to say it's a religion. You ask people, "तुम्हारा धर्म क्या है?" They will say, "मैं हिंदू हूँ."
धर्म और रिलीजन में they'll talk ना कि धर्म is
Yeah,
not
no, that is always done. That is always done as a distraction. That is always done to, like, when people don't want to answer questions. Yeah, but like, you've seen that Jordan Peterson thing recently. Like, what do you mean? But like, if you take the phrase, "Do you believe in God?" What do you mean do? What do you mean believe? What do you mean is? These things are only done as distractions. These things are done when people don't want to answer a simple question. The question is very simple.
Mhm.
Like yesterday, I was watching Andor ka season finale. These guys go into a control room and says, "Turn it off," and the guy says, "Turn it off" could mean so many things, and yet they shoot someone, and then he gets it. So these things are usually done as to divert attention
Mhm.
from the main question. But the simple fact of the matter is that we know what Hindu means today.
Mhm.
We know what Indian means today. We know what the Charvak stood for. We even, like, forget about Charvaks. If you want to take up any philosophy in ancient India, a better label for it is Indian and not Hindu, right? And then there is another problem, which is that Hindus often appropriate things that do not belong to them. This is something Christians also do and Muslims also do, by the way, but in countries where they have power. In India, since it's a Hindu majority country, Hindus will claim the Buddha. Hindus will say Buddha was the ninth avatar of Vishnu, and Buddhists are super pissed about it. And no, he's not. He's our teacher. So, so this is called Brahminical in some circles and not called Brahminical in some circles. I don't want to go into that. It's a longer conversation.
Mhm.
But Hindus have appropriated tribal deities and call them avatars of Vishnu. Hindus have taken Buddha. Hindus are trying to claim Charvak. It's like some guy who came in and said, "ये मेरा है, ये मेरा है, वो भी मेरा है, वो सब जो वहाँ पे रखा है, वो सभी मेरा है." Just randomly, for no reason. If we want to be academically honest with ourselves, we have to recognize that Hindu right now means a thing, and that is one religion. And the entire body of Indian antiquity, all the philosophies there, should probably be called Indian.
Yeah.
And if someone wants to call themselves an atheist, call yourself an atheist.
Yeah.
And if you want to specify the landmass you belong to, call yourself an Indian atheist or an atheist from India. What is the need for Hindu atheism or atheist Hindu? I don't understand.
And
I
it's also
think it's
sorry
mostly,
to
I
cut you
think,
off.
because
Huh?
people don't want to let go of the religious identity. They
Hmm.
want to keep the privileges that come from being Hindu. And they also want to be cool followers of Sam Harris, Richard
Huh.
Dawkins, and everything. So they call themselves a Hindu
That's
atheist.
why I said, na, ki they still want to be seen in this rational school of thought, but still want to be a part of the Hindu fold in some
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah,
Huh.
it's. I'll also make something else clear. I have much more respect for ex-Muslim atheists because they actually risk their lives when they become atheists. For most Hindus, becoming an atheist is not a big deal. तुम घर पे बोलो मैं atheist हूँ, किसी को कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. There will be some frowns, maybe some. If your grandfather is really strict, maybe बच्चा बिगड़ गया वगैरह वगैरह. But for most Hindus, being an atheist, living in a Hindu family is perfectly okay. Muslims actually, ex-Muslims from Pakistan actually risk a lot. People who have grown up in evangelical Christian homes in America are thrown out of their homes when their parents or relatives find out that they're atheists. Hindus, by contrast, live a reasonably comfortable life.
Hmm.
If a Hindu wants to experience the kind of rejection these people experience, they should say, "I reject the caste system. I reject the fact that I belong to an oppressor caste, and I reject that. And I think my religion, my privilege as an upper caste, so-called upper caste individual, gives me a lot of, causes me to have a lot of advantages in life that people otherwise don't. And my family itself is discriminating against people. And I reject all this, then see what happens."
Yeah.
So, but Hindus won't do this. This is an easy way out. Calling yourself an atheist as an upper caste Hindu, it's practically of zero consequence. So people do it. It's a fun thing on the side.
So caste was a big thing I wanted to get to, but just sticking on the Hindu atheism part, I just feel, don't you think it's a conflated thing altogether? Because first of all, atheism is a very sort of, as far as I sort of understood it, and maybe I'm wrong, it's a very Abrahamical way of looking at perhaps God. So
Hmm.
even within, let's say, the Hindu fold, if you want to call yourselves a Gnostic, that so in some sense you can still be a Hindu as well as being, let's say, not believing in the conventional forms of God, right? So that means you don't have to call yourself a Hindu atheist. You could just call yourself a Hindu.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, people would say, "Kecha, you're religious." The people perhaps who don't have, let's say, a more nuanced understanding of the schools of thought. But that's how I would look at it. So sort of to then say Hindu atheist makes no sense to me. It's like, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah.
That's true. But also another thing is that we need to stop stratifying the definition of atheism into this one thing, because
Okay.
Sure, atheism, if you break down the words themselves, it means not believing in theos, which is the, some
Mm-hmm.
kind of Roman or Greek. Was it? Yeah,
I
the
think
idea
so.
of God, right?
Yeah.
But we need to pay attention to the fact that back in ancient Rome, when the Christians first came around, they were called atheists because they did not believe in theos, right? And at various points of time, any religion which has been in opposition to,
Christ was called an atheist when he
yeah,
sort of
yeah, yeah,
rejected
yeah,
Judaism. Yeah.
right. So it depend. Atheism has always been a a position that has stood in opposition to the dominant religious flavor of whatever has
Mm-hmm.
been in that milieu.
Mm-hmm.
So in India right now, it does not help at all to say you're an atheist because you're not Christian or Muslim. Christians are not a majority, Muslims are not a majority, Hindus are a majority. So if you are calling yourself an Indian atheist, the most natural conclusion one can draw from it is that you're opposed to the most popular flavor of ice cream sold in the subcontinent, which is Hinduism, right? So we have to see it in that context. And I have been contemplating making a video about what is a god, right? People, you say a god, people usually jump to the conclusion of some kind of personal god, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone with a personality, intention, compassion,
Sargun.
face, the ability to listen to prayers, etc. But in the Indian subcontinent, if the personal God is not in play,
Okay.
are we all atheists? No, because we still believe in things like karma, which assign a moral
Mm-hmm.
quality to the universe. We still believe in something like reincarnation, which assumes that there is something called a soul in the human, which transmigrates through multiple lives. So we need to clarify the definition of God in order to understand atheism in the right context, given the time and space we occupy.
See, that's what I was saying because see again, I guess I'll just use Hindu because just for common, just
Hmm.
for convenience sake. So as I said, right, as you were talking about as well, because if one's not talking about a god, they can still be talking about, let's say, the different, as you talked about. So if you think of a god, people perhaps for the most part may associate a personality to that
Hmm.
individual or to that being or whatever you
Hmm.
may call it. So within the Hindu fold as well, you can sort of look at how that's perhaps the Sargun perspective of how they feel that God is in some sense in a form. So
Hmm.
you can talk about the Vaishnava traditions or something of that
Yeah.
sort. But then again, as you said as well, that there are perhaps a Nirgun tradition where they still believe in that there's something sort of to the nature um, that's beyond the material aspects of the world, but it is formless. So perhaps at the Advaita Vedanta traditions or the Vishwa Buddha Advaita, I'm forgetting. So there are multiple sects
Yeah, I know, I
in the
know.
Vedanta
Yeah.
tradition as well. It
The,
just
the, the problem is
rolls on the
you
tongue.
again usually again all of this is used as a distraction. You will be having a conversation with a Hindu about the existence of God,
Hmm.
and you will run into a corner where they can no longer justify the existence of a personal God. They will seamlessly shift into Nirguna Brahma. Yeah, but we also have Nirguna Brahma. अबे हम लोग बात किस बारे में कर रहे थे?
Uh,
If you want to change topics, Hinduism has a lot of scope because it is designed to change topics.
hmm, hmm, hmm.
It is designed to not. It's designed to be slippery.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I think there's something else that you talk about a lot on your channel is how, as you were talking about in this introductory bit as well, that how you sort of went to the regular suspects, be it Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and something of
Mm-hmm.
that sort. But of recent streams in of the recent past, you've talked about how you sort of become disenfranchised from them as well, perhaps because of the views that they've put out in
Yeah.
other circles or even within the atheistic community of how they sort of only letting certain individuals in or sort of giving the space to certain individuals to voice their opinion. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because even in the Indian circuit, for the people who are perhaps close to the atheist school of thought or perhaps call themselves atheists, would sort of associate themselves with these individuals.
Hmm.
So can you talk about, let's say, what are the problematic things that you do find about these individuals and you don't really want to associate yourself in that particular school of thought anymore?
Well, primarily, so Richard Dawkins, my problem with Richard Dawkins was that despite realizing that the comments he was making about Muslims continued to do so, and he's kind of lost the plot. I think some award was taken back from him because of Islamophobia. But then there are people who say Islamophobia is a made up term. By and large, I think Richard Dawkins's problem is that he refuses to acknowledge the privilege that his status grants him, and he does not take responsibility for the ill impact of the things that he says. Sam Harris, my problem has been that how do I put it? Sam Harris uh, has, what was the thing that I actually like? He has stood in support of some theories which are like, there was this how there is an IQ difference between white people and people of color. And
Oh, that was because I think you're referencing. So he had this conversation. I'm forgetting the name of the person. So there was this man who wrote so there was this very famous book. It became very controversial. It's
hmm,
called The Bell Curve.
yeah,
So that talks about like the differences in IQ between sort of genetic groups and different population
hmm,
groups. And so Sam sort of entertained a conversation on his podcast about that. And he got a lot of flack by many sort of journalists sort of saying, ki, how can you entertain such
yeah.
a viewpoint? And his sort of thing was, ki, it's just a viewpoint. It's not that I subscribe to it. And I wish to have everyone sort of on board. Now, I can understand why people may disagree with it or why people may agree with it. But that's what his stance was. Are you referencing that?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
My problem is also with Sam Harris platforming a lot of crap.
That's
Like
okay.
he
Yeah.
was also platforming Jordan Peterson. I am just having a discussion, and the kind of discussion we're having is and giving platform to a person who is spreading actively dangerous ideas in society, and a lot of that ends up being life threatening, especially in COVID times. So
Mhm.
my primary point about Sam Harris is that I think I do remember having some other problems, but it's
I
kind
think
of
I've heard you.
it was some time ago.
I think I've heard you talk about like I don't know if he was in support of the Iraq war or
That
if
was Hitchens. That was
that was
Hitchens.
Hitchens.
Yeah.
Right,
My
right,
problem
right.
with Hitchens was that he was a supporter of the Iraq War, and when the entire thing about weapons of mass destruction were not found over there, he never apologized for it. To his dying day, he was like, "Yeah, but look at all the good it did," which seemed like backpedaling, but not really wanting to say that I fucked up. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
So all three of these guys, they are powerful individuals in their fields. They wield a lot of privilege, but to a certain degree, at least, it seems to me that they're unwilling to accept responsibility for the things, for the power that they have. They want to pretend as if their actions don't have consequences beyond those that they intend, and that is a problem for me. Matt Dillahunty, I really like.
Okay.
Matt Dillahunty, I really like. I'm in agreement with most of his positions. I'm in a little bit of a doubt about veganism, but
Okay.
he has his own position on
Is
that,
he
and
is he a
that
vegan?
also, no, he's not a vegan.
Okay.
Uh, he's not a vegan. His position is that veganism is morally virtuous but not morally obligatory. Like,
Okay.
if a house is burning, it is morally virtuous to go into it and protect people, but everyone who did not go in is not a bad person. So that's his position about veganism. I
Hmm.
don't know if I completely agree with it, but that's his position, and I am in agreement with Matt Dillahunty on most other matters. I myself am not a vegan. I have stopped consuming meat for a couple of years, but I still consume dairy products.
Okay.
But yeah, that's where I am. And yeah, those are the four. I think Daniel Dennett I really not never really engaged with, so I can't speak of.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. I know you don't really like talking about these things, but do you think you will sort of move into perhaps the vegan fold, if you want to call it, in the near future, or do you think that it's too, I don't know, it's too personal a thing?
I don't know, honestly, but I will tell you this. Even if I become a vegan, I will not encourage
Evangelize.
talk about, yeah, I will not evangelize about it, because we live in a country where food habits get people killed. And I don't want my argument. Like, this is the kind of thing I was talking about, right? Being responsible with the ideas you put out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying vegans are bad people, but I am saying that we live in a country where the dominant majority imposes some kind of vegetarian supremacism upon people and judges people for it, and people have been known to die. People
Mm-hmm.
have been murdered because of it.
Yeah.
People have been murdered because they were suspected of having meat in their refrigerators. There is casteist by violence happening against people from certain tribes because they eat animal meat. So I don't want to add to it, and I don't think, like, this is my personal journey. My food habits are my own.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll become a vegan, maybe I'll not become a vegan, but it will remain a personal thing for me. I will
I
never evangelize about it. I will never tell other people what to eat and what not to eat.
I think you put it really nicely because this sort of reminds me. I don't know if you came across this, but once Gandhiji was asked, and he had like really sort of out of the place dietary sort of preferences as well. So he was asked ki if you had the choice to sort of have the whole country go vegetarian, would you want that? He said, I wouldn't, because primarily because there are so many of the people who are from the Dalit area of society who are sort of in these particular industries and in these particular jobs. So for me to overnight say that the whole country goes vegetarian
Yeah.
is totally, it's a no go for me. So I think, so yeah, it's a really difficult topic. I think it has to be slowly and how things have to transition into that particular fold. But yeah.
Hmm.
Um so we were talking about caste a little while back, and let's just circle back to it. As you have talked about in your sort of videos as well, that many people perhaps who, I don't know if they still call themselves Hindu, or perhaps they associate, even if they don't call themselves Hindu, they're subconsciously associating themselves in a lot of sort of Hindu-like activities, perhaps. Um, so they would say, yeah, sure, I'm like, so I'm a Brahmin, but I don't believe in the caste system or something of those sorts. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because there is often this misconception that people still have, that they still perhaps find pride in their caste identity, yet saying that they're not casteist in some sense.
Yeah.
Can you sort of disentangle that? Because I think that's quite important, just for the individuals to sort of grapple with, really.
I think if someone is saying I am Brahmin, but I don't believe in the caste system, they should know that if you're saying that you are a Brahmin, you believe in the caste system. Because if you did not believe in the caste system, you would not be a Brahmin, right? But then there's another thing to keep in mind, which is that a lot of us are never allowed to look past our caste based lens because our families bring us up on the idea that we are superior to other people because of our caste. So you appear to be an upper caste individual. I appear to be an upper caste individual. We have been brought up in families which lie to us essentially because they have also been lied to by the Brahminical system, which is about our superior status in society. So when someone says that I don't believe in the caste system, they are kind of superficially doing it because that's the flavor of the day and age. Nobody will actually, unless you are a super regressive monster, you will not say, I believe in the caste system. The caste system is right. These people are inferior to me.
Mm.
If you're a reasonably, a well-educated urban individual, you will say, I don't believe the caste system should exist. But the real test of that is not that sentiment. It's very easy to say that. The real test of it is, do you recognize how much power and privilege you have in society because of your caste? Like, we talk about punching up and punching down as comedians. You can't understand which direction to punch in unless you know where you are, right? You'll punch someone, but they will probably be below you, right? So people don't realize their own caste privilege. There are entire groups of entertainers composed completely of Brahmins or upper caste individuals, and they think that they're social justice warriors. When not one word has ever come out of any of
Uh,
them about the caste system.
yeah.
So I hear this in so many places. Like one of the most funniest things I hear in India is, I'm a journalist. Journalist का कोई कास्ट नहीं होता. I'm a comedian. Comedian का कोई कास्ट नहीं होता. I'm a politician. Politician का कोई कास्ट नहीं होता. भैया सबका कास्ट होता है. तुम्हारा कास्ट है. तुम्हें पता नहीं है या तुम जानबूझ के छुपाना चाहते हो. That's a different matter. But caste denial takes the form of this also,
Yeah.
and it's a problem.
And I could see it for myself if I just have to sort of share. So I recently, I've mentioned this on the podcast as well. I had this good opportunity to sort of volunteer in this small village in Madhya Pradesh, and that's where so I am, let's say, a Savarna. So I am, let's say, from, let's say, the Banya caste, even
Hmm.
though I don't want to associate with that. But for example, just for common sakes, but yeah, and that was the first time when I sort of went to the village. I was interacting with people at the village and the kids in the village. This was a particular school that I was sort of volunteering at, and yeah, I was just shocked at the sort of frequency that this question was sort of asked to me. Ki, Acha bhaiya, which caste do you belong to, or something of
Hmm.
that sort. And it was just normal place for them in some sense. And that's where it struck to me, ki, Acha, like what the
Yeah, yeah,
reality
yeah.
of things are.
They shoot that gun shamelessly. We put a
Yeah.
silencer on it.
Huh.
We
Like
still
in,
do it,
huh.
right? Like
Yeah.
when an upper caste person tries to find a groom for their daughter or son, they will still check all the caste markers. They will still discriminate against people from caste in a workplace. They will still give, if not actively discriminate, they will still give preference to people from upper caste.
Mm-hmm.
But they will never openly say that I'm casteist. So a lot of these things, like there is significant amount of casteism in academia. There is practically an epidemic of suicide among Dalit students and academic and scholars because they get bullied in universities.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about it except them. And I
Rohit,
think
there was the famous Rohit
Rohit
Vermilla case.
Vemula case,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And there have been cases every year. I think there was a case a week ago also.
Oh wow, okay.
There was a student who was who has died by suicide, there was a suicide note, and that suicide note is not being made public, and the police is making it about, I'm forgetting the name
Oh
entirely,
wow.
but I think this happened somewhere. I shouldn't guess. It happened somewhere in India,
ठीक है.
and the police is trying to make it about. The police is saying that she died. She died by suicide because she was lonely, and they're not paying attention to the caste aspect of it at all, and the family is fighting about it.
Yeah. And as you were saying as well, so that when I talked about the whole aspect in the village, so that's more, let's say, in explicit terms. So they're asking me about it.
Yeah,
And I don't know if if their sort of intention was malicious or whatever it may be, maybe just out of general curiosity, or maybe they don't really understand the wider, I don't know, the ramifications of it or whatever. But as you said, in metro cities, it's a lot more implicit, or it's a lot more sort of like yeah, it's a lot more implicit. So for example, why is it that the people who sort of help you in for example with domestic help that come to your house, why are they of a certain
yeah,
community? Or
yeah.
for
Why
example,
are
if you
sanitation workers always from a certain
huh,
community?
or
Yeah.
if you drive down, let's say, Lutyens Delhi, why are
We have just put uniforms and
exactly
name tags on the system, and I don't think we should even call it implicit or people are not aware of it. Everyone is aware of the
hmm,
fact that they're looking for the same caste groom for their daughter, right? Everyone is aware that they're looking for the same caste bride for their son. Everyone is aware of it. We just don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable for our urban sensibilities, and I think we should talk about it more. We should give the platform to the people who are oppressed by us, and we should brace for the impact that their conversations are going to bring us, because it's not going to be easy. If someone has never done this in their life, it's not going to be easy.
yeah.
You are going to get called an oppressor, and you're going to have to listen to it. We are going to have to listen to it. There is no other way. If we want to be comfortable, then we are not going to be able to do this.
Something else that I've sort of heard you talk about, and I don't know if I entirely agree with it, is something. So you've often talked, ki, for example, if we are, let's say, Savarnas,
Hmm.
and we've had all this privilege that we've been brought up with, and we still sort of have that privilege whenever we walk in Indian society and things of that sort. But I think you've sort of mentioned this, that it may not always be the right thing for you, for Savarnas, to sort of talk about caste or sort of talk about these issues on, let's say, a public landscape, on a public
Hmm.
platform, because that inherently is perhaps casteist, or that is inherently again not sort of getting at the roots of the issue, because you said ki it has to be people, or it has to be individuals who are from that particular community or who have been oppressed, that should be
Hmm.
having their voices out.
Yeah, I have
I
not said that Savarna should not do it. I
okay.
have said that Savarna anti caste activism cannot happen in the absence of people from the backward, so-called backward community,
Okay.
because then it becomes yet another example of us taking over spaces that are not ours, right? It is very easy for a Savarna commentator to write books about casteism, get applause from other Savarna people, have that book praised internationally. Oh wow, such a woke individual who wrote a anti-caste book, etc. While several publications entirely run by Dalit individuals are desperately trying to make a living because their books are not selling,
Mhm.
right? So this space where we talk about caste has to be mostly the voices of those who have been marginalized. Like the other day, someone came and said that, uh, why do you think transphobic jokes are not funny? I have done my research and I find it funny, and I don't know of anyone who does not find them funny. And I said, have you asked a trans person? He said no. Therein lies the problem.
Mhm.
We create a bubble where people like us exist. We talk about a thing, we shake our heads, we get really happy that we are so aware of things, and we have never ever heard a word from them. They might actually look at you in disgust because they think of you as a hypocrite. They think of
Mhm.
you as, you know, yeah, he's saying all the right things, but he's doing it because he wants to look woke or look progressive, etc. But in his everyday life, in his conduct, in his even in his attempts to supposedly solve this problem, there is no sign of anything, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I said, I don't say that you and I should not talk about caste, but our conversation should primarily be not towards the pointed at the Dalit community. It should be pointed at our people. We need to explain to them what we are
Mhm.
doing wrong. We should be the Vibhishan of this, right? We should tell Ravan what he's doing wrong.
Yeah.
And that's a bad example because I took it from another Savarna text, Ramayana, but it's just an example. Just an example.
Aryan Invader Ram.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, no, no, Iron Veteran, uh, I think that there are Hindu Brahmins who will say that Ravan was a Brahmin,
Yeah.
right? So there is a bit of a mix there,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just the first example that came to my mind. I'm saying
Fair
that
enough.
when we talk about caste, we should give primacy
See, that's a
to the
limitation of
voices
our
of people who have been oppressed.
that's a limitation of our upbringing, right? That
Yeah, yeah,
even when we
exactly.
think of examples, it's these sort of texts
Yeah,
that sort
yeah,
of give up supremacy to our caste-based identities and caste-based literature and things like that.
yes.
Yeah. If I have to play devil's advocate, don't you think that, for example, if we keep creating these communities, when you talked about, let's say, we shouldn't be talking, we shouldn't be putting out jokes, perhaps that is pointed at, let's say, the trans community, or let's say the LGBT community more largely, or towards women, or towards any of these sort of groups that we've put together,
Hmm.
which we think are oppressed in society. Don't you think eventually that it'll just come down to the individual, because what will happen is that these groups are endless. Do you know what where I'm coming from? Because you can
Hmm.
call yourselves you can call yourself an atheist, you can call yourself a heterosexual man. I'm just assuming, you may
Hmm.
be wrong. You can call yourself so many other things. You live in a certain city, you live in a certain country, and what I'm trying to say is that, don't you think these will be endless, and at the end of the day it will come down to the individual, that acha, it's Vimoh who I'm talking about, or it's Ishan who I'm talking about, or something of that sort.
I don't know what you mean by it come down to individual.
So, for example, if we're talking, so it used to be racist jokes that weren't sort of allowed, and
Yeah,
in some
yeah.
sense they still aren't,
Hmm.
and obviously there is still racism that permeates through society and things of that sort. Perhaps it's lesser than it used to be. Now we're talking about caste, or
Hmm.
perhaps before that we were talking about gender. Now we're talking about trans individual,
Hmm.
like the trans individuals. So what I'm trying to say is that, if we don't you think that with time you'll simply just be creating these communities and these ways of associating and of associating individuals and putting
Hmm.
them in a basket,
Hmm. No, 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 no. Okay, I got what you're saying.
right?
No, I don't think it will, because this is not about numbers. It's about marginalization.
ठीक है.
Like, for example, some days ago, I had a fight with apparently a 17-year-old boy on my Instagram account where he said, "You're being biased towards 17-year-old. Of 17-year-olds are not 30. No politician stands on a stage. Ishan, you're frozen kind of. You're back.
I'm so sorry. Huh.
No politician stands on a stage and says, we must throw all the 17-year-olds out of the country. They are still a group, right? But nobody targets them. But when it comes to, like, even, nobody targets Jains, and they're
Mm-hmm.
a super minority. Nobody targets, like, with the situation with Buddhists is about to change, I think, because of Dalit activism. But nobody targets people just because they're a small group. People target certain groups because of ideological variations in the way people think. So Muslims are a marginalized community in India. They may not be a minority in terms of number as much as Jains are, but Muslims are targeted because they're marginalized.
Mm-hmm.
And jokes about Muslims being terrorists will get repeated in front of some Muslim man or woman or Muslim person, and they will get bullied because of it. Similarly, trans people are marginalized. For a long time, we were not aware of this because we all assumed it's okay to make anti trans jokes. But now they have a voice and they are speaking up and they're telling you this is a huge problem. There is research to indicate that if trans people did not have to live an entire life not only identifying as a gender that they're not, but also looking at popular media which makes fun of what they are, if they didn't have to do this, they would have much, much more healthier mental lives. But imagine living in a world where everyone thinks your very identity is a joke. Our cinema is full of it. Our literature is full of it.
Our
There are in
conversations, our
Yeah, yeah.
everything. Yeah.
The idea of cross dressing is made a joke out of, and I'll be honest, we have all been guilty of it. I have also been guilty of it in the past. But the problem is to realize when someone comes up to you and says that, hey, please don't do this, the least you can do is not do it. I don't understand the moral panic around this. Ki, oh my God, if a trans person comes to me and says that my joke offends them, my freedom of speech is in danger. No, it's not. They're not going to be able to shut you up. You have more powerful. You're more powerful than they are. You have more resources than they have. If you want to, you can continue to make the jokes. The question is, after you have learned that your jokes are being used to bully someone, will you continue to do it? Because your answer to that question will tell me if you're a sensitive human being or not. And by the way, there is a huge difference in opposition coming from below and opposition coming from above. Make all the jokes you want about people more powerful than you. right? Politicians are not a majority, right? But they are more powerful than you. They can marginalize you. They can have an impact on your life and your living. Trans people can't do that to you. The most they can do is oppose what you have done and raise a stink on social media. And I find it hilarious that people think that is a bigger danger than actual politicians putting people in jails for jokes. How many comedians actually say that politicians coming after comedians is cancel culture? Because that actually cancels you, right? It takes you out of the picture. It causes you physical damage, it causes your career significant damage. Nobody calls it cancel culture. But when people less powerful say something, then, oh, I'm being cancelled. Nothing is going to happen to you. You're going to hide for a few days and come back on your friend's live stream and talk about the regular stuff.
Uh, So I know we're running short of time, but I have to sort of ask you this before we sort of end the conversation. Like you sort of, you've been very vocal about, let's say, the establishment, and you've sort of posed your critiques regarding the same. So if you'd be comfortable, can you sort of talk about what are the core things? Because we've been largely sort of talking about these issues in more broader terms and how these are actually impacting us. But there's like
Hmm.
a political machine that's in power right now
Yeah.
who sort of pretty much circling all of these boxes when it comes to many of these factors. So can you talk about what your sort of why are you disenfranchised with, let's say, the BJP, which is currently in power in India, and what are some of the things that you just cannot stand as, let's say, an Indian citizen right now?
I can't stand the shamelessness of it. Mostly the shamelessness of it. The utter shamelessness with which we have become a country that, like, I remember a time when sexual assault happened and people got together to oppose the crime, right? Now we get together to garland the person who committed the rape. Now we get together to welcome rapists being released from jail. Now we get together to cast aspersions on the woman who was assaulted. Now we get together to laugh at the person who is hurt. The shamelessness, the utter and absolute shamelessness of it breaks my heart. Deeper problems, obviously. There are policy decisions made which target members of the Muslim community and Dalits. There is incredible amount of apathy from the courts. Really simple see-through cases where the person is just put in jail, Umar Khalid being an example, for no crime at all.
No charge sheet.
Absolutely no crime. No trial, no crime,
No
in
charge
jail
sheet
for
for like how
years.
many? I'm
Yeah,
forgetting
yeah.
the days. Yeah, yeah, it's insane.
This is a government waging war against the people. And that is my problem with it. And sure, I would also like to add that it's not as if things were hunky dory before these people came to power. Things were quite shitty prior to 2014 also. But the clarity with which the problems in the system have been made apparent to clueless individuals like me in the last 10 years doesn't compare to anything. And I don't even think that if the BJP goes from power, all this will miraculously come to an end.
Mhm.
But it will be a beginning.
Do you see light at the end of the tunnel? Like you've spoken about,
Always. Always.
where do you see that? You've spoken quite you quite colorfully about, let's say, the Bharat Jodo Yatra with Rahul Gandhi and many of the other sort of, not just the Congress people, but also many of the other sort of activists, filmmakers, and other people are
Hmm.
sort of getting behind. Do you see that as like some sort of hope that we have? And perhaps some of the other sort of like Nitesh's victory in Bihar, or some of the other
Huh.
sort of things that are coming together that can sort of push, let's say,
So
can
I don't know if I've spoken very colorfully about the Bharat Jodo Yatra, but I am optimistic
you
about
you have said
any.
ki, sorry,
Uh,
maybe from
hmm,
what I've gathered, you've said it's a good thing for the Congress, maybe to get their consciousness back
yeah,
amongst the
yeah,
Indian crowd at least.
yeah,
I think you've said ki how it'll pan out for India, that's still yet to be seen.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
think it's a positive. I think these sort of
It is. It
things,
is. I
you know
think
what
it
I
is a
mean?
positive. Every voice that is trying to unite India against hatred, every voice that is saying, "Hey, maybe being on the side of murderers and rapists is not a great idea." Every such common sense voice deserves applause, deserves encouragement, regardless of where it is coming from.
And isn't
I
actually
have,
playing the soft Hindutva game that many of the other parties, like the Aam Aadmi Party,
yeah,
are
yeah,
sort
yeah,
of
yeah.
landing in that question.
Aam Aadmi Party has been such a disappointment and
Yeah.
on so many levels. It's like BJP part two.
Yeah.
But even Aam Aadmi Party and Aam Aadmi Party winning elections in Punjab as a political party, which is like really small,
Hmm.
right, is an amazing thing. Nitish Kumar breaking away from the BJP is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Chief ministers in this.
Obviously we can talk about Nitesh's record and all that kind of stuff. We have to look at, okay, that's there, but we have to
Hmm.
look at what's the essential thing right
Yeah, yeah,
now.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. If you are falling in a ditch and the only person there to pull you out is someone who borrowed 500 rupees from you 3 years ago and never returned
Huh.
it, take their hand. It's okay. It's an emergency.
Yeah. But yeah, Vimo, this has been great. I've really loved the conversation. I think I've only scratched the surface. There's so much more we could have talked about. Is there some sort of parting words that you'd like to leave my audience and the viewers with? Yeah.
No, not really. This was a great experience, and I've said everything I could have possibly said. In fact, I'm surprised we covered this much in 1 hour.
Yeah, that's what I
Uh,
was like really pacing through the questions because there's so
yeah.
many things I
No,
wanted to
man,
ask.
you're a great conversationist. It went by like super fast. I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
even
I felt the
notice it.
same. I felt the same
Yeah.
as well. Okay, yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I'll be linking all your socials in the links. But if there's anything you'd like to leave the listeners with where they can find you, your work,
Well,
whatever.
primarily, like I'm at a time in my life when my socials don't look like they're going to continue existing for a long time because Instagram is a garbage fire and uh, Twitter is also going in the same direction. So just
Uh-huh.
follow me on my YouTube channel. I do a live stream.
Which is sort of sane
Uh,
for now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sort of safe for now, but let's see. Let's see. I have a YouTube channel called Vimoh Live, youtube.com/at Vimoh Live. I go live every Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. and every Saturday at 9:30 p.m. I sometimes do interviews. Sometimes it's just a call-in show. People call in and talk to me about stuff like this, and we have a lot of fun. So subscribe there and hit the bell icon.
This
Also
was
subscribe to this channel.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Vimo, this was great. Love to have this conversation sometime again in the future. I love listening to you whenever you're on. And yeah, this
Sure.
was really fun. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for having me.